Ever wonder what everyone's doing on their phones? They're banking with Bank of America. They're saving, planning, and budgeting all before dessert.
Digital tools so impressive, you just can't stop banking. What would you like the power to do?
There's a clock there that says 19 minutes and 50 seconds. I don't think we've ever had a conversation that short. So we're going to try to abide by the rules, though. For the people here, Nia, that do not know about Union Heritage and the history of the firm, why don't we, as a foundation, just give a little background on the business?
Absolutely. Union Heritage is an investment advisor. We are celebrating our 35th year in business. We're headquartered here in Detroit. We have 3 lines of business: public equity, private equity, we're venture capital, early stage venture here in Michigan, and then philanthropic investments. And so the firm was founded by my father, who's our managing partner, 35 years ago.
I think Derek's here somewhere. Is he here?
He's here somewhere. He's here. And it's just been, an incredible opportunity really to learn from him. We've been observing the trends in our public market business, and I think, 35 years ago, the average age of a company in the S&P was 50 years, and now it's 12 years. 40% of the S&P are venture-backed companies, and so when you start to, again, be aware of those trends, and we had been angel investors for the past 10, 11 years now, and so we started to think about what it looks like to institutionalize an early stage venture strategy. And so I spend most of my time now on the private side helping to lead that strategy.
Are there any deals that you guys are involved in that you're super excited about, that you can talk about?
Yeah, definitely a few that we can talk about. And I'm so excited that Darren Riley from Just Air was on the stage earlier today. Johnny and Alexa Turnage at Black Tech Saturdays, of which we're supporters, said that they think Darren Riley's company could be the next black unicorn here in Michigan. I'd love to see that, with the leadership of Warren Evans at the county level. What we really need to see is the expansion of Just Air's technology across the state. I think that would be incredible to see. And Doug Song, who's one of our investors, in his presentation, you saw Web AI as, another unicorn in the making. And so we're excited about that company. Very sad to see a lot of the operations move to Texas, but a lot of the work that we're doing is really about trying to figure out ways that we can support companies at the earliest phases, and then also make sure that they continue to have support from the ecosystem, from partners as they grow. But I think the one that I'm maybe most excited about in this moment is Crystal Brown at Cirque Nova. Mm-hmm. And so when we start to look at, a round of applause for Crystal. We start to look at, the healthcare space, which is a space that we invest in, especially in our early stage portfolio, and advancements in AI and what that means. I mean, she's really built something special, a black woman founder here in the city of Detroit, and she's gonna have a really big year. And so I'm excited about Crystal. I think you all will probably know her name and face very well, probably by the end of this quarter even.
So talk about, you mentioned Crystal being a sister. Talk about the lack of opportunity heretofore for people of color and women, both receiving funding and raising and managing funds, and why that's so important to you and your partner.
Yeah, so when we launched, we were the first African-American majority-owned venture capital firm in the state. We are also majority women-owned. There are, I think, 2 other firms now, and one is run by a woman, Brigaria Goddard, who actually used to work with us many years ago, and then our friends Kalamazoo Forward Ventures on the west side of the state. Having a deep bench is really important. If Michigan is serious about being an inclusive economy, if we want to continue to build on the momentum of being the fastest growing startup ecosystem, we have to really pay attention not only to what kind of companies are getting funded, but who is able to allocate the funding. That's the nuanced conversation that oftentimes people don't want to step into. And what we hear from our founders across the state, but if we're thinking about a city like Detroit, which is over 80% Black, it's a relevant conversation for the stage. And what you find is that there's challenges to accessing capital, there's challenges in terms of mentorship and resources, and oftentimes we find that we might have a relationship with a founder, Crystal Brown's a great example, for years before we even write that first check. But it's important to us. It's important to, my father, who's had, success, and, we were acquired by Morgan Stanley briefly, took the company back private, and when we did so, he said, I want to figure out how we're going to train 100 founders in Michigan to be investor ready. And we want to see as many diverse founders, in that sort of larger cohort and a part of that strategy as possible. But part of it is listening and learning and trying to figure out where the friction is in the process and how, as investors, we can help to reduce it. How we can have really solutions-oriented conversations with our partners about how we can help inform their programming and what we're looking for, and understanding that as milestone-based investors, it really does take a village, and we have to wrap arms and resources around our founders. But if we don't, and if we decide to ignore the data, and we can see that whether it's Detroit or Grand Rapids, the gaps to funding parity for, if we take Black and brown founders, are greatest in the areas where they're the most prevalent. So that's like real data that we have to look at and contend with and not run from. And so we have to make sure that, as for us who invest in underrepresented founders, and that underrepresentation extends to geography, it extends to industry as well. We just have to really make sure that the founders are being supported, but that the allocators are being supported as well.
So data is the foundation to directing policy, and I want to come to policy shortly. But you had a very storied career in the entertainment business. What made you decide to completely pivot and come work with your dad and to pursue this?
Yeah, I mean, I did. I spent almost 11 years in-house at what is now Paramount Global, working in New York and LA. I'm a classic boomerang. I did what you're supposed to do. You leave and you go and see the world, and I gained a significant amount of experience in consumer insights for our audiences across 160 cable television networks across the globe, our film studio, and hundreds of digital properties. And what I started to become aware of is that the consumer sort of element and an audience element of our business was applicable more so than I thought to a lot of the angel investing that we were doing. And I found myself in rooms with tech founders in New York and also in California who were building companies in real time, whether it's like Warby Parker or Uber, in which is an investment of ours. And for over 10 years, sometimes you have winners. Not everything is an Uber. You hope to have an Uber, but there's other investments that we made that didn't work. And so you start to get conditioned to failure. And when you're at a big entertainment company like Paramount, you're just used to winning. And so we would win all the time. For the most part, all the content was great, but what I started to really understand is I have a transferable skill set, and I have a deep interest in connectivity to the startup ecosystem, and I have really been in the rooms with people building these companies. And if you can have access and if you can have capital, can we institutionalize that into a strategy? And it just so happens that it was sort of at the same time when my dad was really ready to do that.
So going back to policy for a second. So many of you probably saw the Crain's article that came up this morning, and it talked about legislation that it has passed, and there being $60 million that I think got distributed to 4 different nonprofit or venture firms around the state, including ID Ventures here in Detroit. My experience being here my whole life is that in Detroit particularly, when there is a cause that everyone finds important, everyone rallies, particularly elected leadership, the business community, and the philanthropic community. I mean, you can talk about the grand bargain, and you can talk about the need for ambulances and police cars. I mean, over and over again, the business leaders are writing checks, philanthropy's chipping in, and elected leadership is making it happen. If you look at other states where I think we rank 29th in early stage venture investing per the article, But if you look at other states that are doing better, there is that cooperation between state government, maybe some local government, philanthropy, and the business community, where you have the significant business players writing big checks to early stage companies and seed and early stage rounds. What do you think has to happen here from a policy perspective to get us to move up from 29th up into the top tier of states?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, a very timely one. I think anybody that works in this ecosystem would say that $60 million is, a decent start, but it's not $500 million, which is probably really what we need. I testified in the House Economic Development Committee and also in the Senate, and I was pretty sort of vocal about how I thought we could make the policy better, the program better. Some of those suggestions were included, although our participation was not. But I think what's important is that it is happening, and I'm very capable of celebrating what I think is still a win for the ecosystem, and also really want to be solutions-oriented about iterative versions and what that might look like, and making sure that there is an inclusive process where everyone can participate. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, it really does take a village. I mean, our second office is in Atlanta, and so when we look at the Atlanta ecosystem, for example, which sort of gets used as a benchmark for a fast-growing ecosystem, and thinking about, if Atlanta becomes Austin, sort of what needs to happen there, and it's 2,000 more companies that need to be started before 2027. How do you do that? But what you see in Atlanta, whether it's like Engage VC or other sort of firms or coalitions, is deep investment from corporate partners that are not only making investment into funds that are supporting entrepreneurs, but even thinking about what does participation as like a first customer for a startup look like. I mean, Bread and Butter in the Twin Cities is another venture firm that we co-invest with, and you see that as well. People don't really, and organizations are not staying on the sidelines in some of these other ecosystems where they realize that the work is really urgent. And my hope is that we also realize that we're always going to be behind unless we take some big swings. And I think that's a good first swing for us to take with the Innovation Fund. And I'm sure that, even the time that I've spent with legislators, and really across the aisle, across both chambers, Senator McMorrow has a 10-year economic development plan that she's working on. It's bipartisan. Like, we need that, I've had an opportunity to spend time, with like Senator Weber, for example, and learn more about aerospace and aerial mobility, which is an area in our early stage portfolio where we're going to be, making some investments as well. And so all of these things are important. It's important for us to have the conversations. It's important for us to keep talking to people, but it's also important for people to start getting more involved. We need to have a more robust angel community. I know that's something that gets talked about often. We need to have more, founders like Doug, who, exits his company, and he's in the streets and in the office every day. It is a pleasure and a joy to work with him. To work with you also. We're very grateful for a lot of the people who have supported us from, the very early days. And they're people that put their money where their mouth is. It's people that will show up to meetings and try and pick up the phone and sort of make calls. And we need that not just from a fundraising standpoint, but we need that for our founders when we start to think about how to build an expert network around them so that, founders like, Crystal do not feel limited as being a biotech founder from Detroit. That feels like an incredible platform and a resourced group of people with capital that can support her on the journey. So we just need more of that. We need people to get engaged. We need, people are, there's lots of conversations about, well, what will my senior management team think, my board, we have pre-scheduled meetings. We just have to free ourselves from that cycle and decide, do we think the problem is urgent? And if we do, what are we, from where we sit, prepared to do about it?
So what should the expectation be? Because I sit on the publicly traded board, and I know if someone came to us and saying they wanted to invest in a fund that invested in early stage companies, obviously we have a fiduciary responsibility to be responsible with our shareholders' money. What should the expectation be if you went to and some of them are in the room, but if you went to some of the larger corporations in town and you were pitching them on the why they should not just invest in you, but invest in the ecosystem early stage generally, what is that pitch? Is it the return? It's the right thing to do? Is it a blend of both?
I mean, ideally, it's a blend of both. I mean, for us as fund managers, we focus on non-concessionary returns. I mean, over 35 years, we've generated $300 million of net returns for our clients. We perform in the top quartile and oftentimes the top decile. We're not just good because we're black; we're good because we're good. Mm-hmm. And so there's that part of it, but. When I look at corporates, I think about the resources that they could spend on accelerators and pre-accelerators. I mean, we don't have enough of those here in Detroit and across the state. I mean, there's, great work that's happening out of, TechTown and Venture 313, and some of the folks that built that program are now, on our team. But founders need non-dilutive capital even before we come in, as investors, and we're equity investors, so we'll make an investment, but we're taking a portion of the company. And if you're an investor in the fund, obviously, that means a return and success, but there's lots of ways that corporates can get involved, and especially if we want to incent more innovation in the areas of focus that directly relate to their business. I mean, we talked a lot about healthcare, here today, and especially across the university systems, there's lots of investment in healthcare as we grapple with the care economy and femtech and sort of what the future of family looks like, and women being those decision makers and heads of household. And so, what are we doing to really make sure that the next generation of founders in the care economy and the femtech space are supported? We have to create pathways for people who might be in corporate jobs to spin out and think about ways in which they can, still become a part of, that sector's ecosystem, but outside of the company as well. We have to just not operate in silos, but really think if we want to build a vibrant, diversified entrepreneurial ecosystem here, then everyone has to determine the best way to get involved. So you mentioned the next generation. Particularly, I can think of a number of companies, even on our chamber board, the Maybachs, the Recoltas. I see George Barnes is here, the Brinkers, Ron Hall, a number of people who are generational in their family businesses. Talk about the dynamic of your working with your father as partners. It was very interesting. Nia's brother and my son graduated from Country Day 2 years ago, and at the graduation, her brother walked across the stage. Her father, who was on the board, handed the diploma, and Nia spoke at the graduation as the keynote. And I just thought that was amazing. It was a very heartfelt experience to see the three of you all up there. But talk about working with your parent on a daily basis as an equal, as partners. Mm-hmm. I'm managing director and he's still managing partner, but we, it's a consensus building approach for especially a lot of our investment decisions. And what I think is really special about my dad, and maybe because, of his kids, two of us are girls, I'm the oldest child also, but I think there is really a desire to make sure that he understands other people's perspectives, and he really empowers people and believes in having the right people in the right seats. And so I've grown up watching that kind of leadership, and that really rubs off. I think that people, when they talk about my dad, he's very disciplined approach for investment, and we manage pension funds, and so that's important to have. And I think that I'm disciplined also, but I probably bring a fair amount of passion. Working with him is really a dream. He's great. He's one of my best friends. I learned so much from him. He's willing to teach, and I'm eager to learn. And I never thought that I would be working, at Union Heritage and finance. And, in many ways, I think it's kind of been in the blood. I mean, even the name Union Heritage is, it's an homage to my grandparents who are all in unions. Our offices are at New Lab at Michigan Central, and the book depository actually used to be the Roosevelt Post Office, which was the same building where my grandfather was a mail clerk. And so every day that I get to walk into that building and into our office with everything that we've accomplished, and certainly, still a challenging road ahead, I know I get to do it with him, with our, incredible team that feels like family. It's not a family business, technically, but really feels like one. And it's just a joy to sort of study him and watch him, and it helps to sharpen and refine the way that I think. And as we launch more products on the public side, certainly, and continue our work on the venture side, I'm just looking forward to having more of a total picture of how he underwrites companies and where he sees value. But it's a fun journey.
I can say that
Dad, wherever you are.
your path has been phenomenal, and you've got a long runway ahead. I'm happy to be on the path with you and your father. And you all watch out for this one. It's definitely a rising star. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Ever wonder what everyone's doing on their phones? They're banking with Bank of America. They're saving, planning, and budgeting all before dessert.
Digital tools so impressive, you just can't stop banking. What would you like the power to do?